the waters of the North Atlantic. The American nuclear submarine Tigerfish 3 begins its voyage to the Arctic camp. Their destination? A secret outpost at the top of the world. Ice Station Zebra. Take her up.
First of all, I just want to tell you what a great show you got. I listen to you all the time.
Thank you. What do you want to talk about?
Hey, did I tell you guys I got a goat?
The invaluable contributions of Hexagon to national security are underscored by General Eugene Tye, a former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency.
The Hexagon system was extraordinarily important to the defense intelligence business in general. You know, the broad requirements for a lot of intelligence from reconnaissance photography beside just installation intelligence. Targeting, for example, particularly nuclear targeting of very important target structures, the tracking of deployment areas, air bases, and so forth. And of course today, tracking down mobile missile systems is terribly, terribly important.
Little column A, little column B.
Yeah, baby!
Well, good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you are, whatever you do. A lot of things happening in the world today. Most of them are far beyond our control, you might say. So perhaps it's time we took a pause and thought about life and thought about the laws of gravity, the Cold War, spy satellites, submersibles, film canisters, Soviet spies, USS Tigerfish 3. Not any politics or the news today. Don't touch that dial. Just try to hear me out for a while. Well, Commander Faraday was headed north in his submarine to face off with Soviets over that spy satellite film canister that had landed off course near Ice Station Zebra. It's a great book. It was a really good movie. How can it get even better, you may be asking? Well, what if it was true? Or at least true-ish. Here's how you get a hold of me. Text machines, area code 209-565-DAVE. It's 209-565-3283. That's also for voicemail. The email is dave@thedavebowmanshow.com. And of course, we're on the web. You can use your preferred non-denominational web search browser to take you to plausiblylive.com or look for The Dave Bowman Show on Facebook, Twitter, and iTunes. Ego biberi capulos et olive verve. I drink coffee so that others might live. It's a good movie. It's one of the first movies. I saw it in submarine school, of all places, at the old theater there at Naval Submarine Base Groton. And quite frankly, it scared the crap out of me. There's a scene in that movie, Ice Station Zebra, where the submarine is sinking, and you can say what you want about all the technical inaccuracies of the film, and that's great, but that scene particularly kind of captures some of the stuff that scares me, still keeps me awake at night sometimes along the way. In 1963, Alister McClain published his novel Ice Station Zebra. It was a fanciful book in the era of the James Bond books, and it was, a spy story. And the idea here was that this spy satellite in orbit tries to deorbit its film canister, and the thing gets off course because of a storm or something, and it lands in the Arctic near a top-secret base known as Ice Station Zebra. And, of course, we want it, they want it, everybody wants it, but we got to figure out how to get it, and it's just no way to reach it by air because of the storm. So a submarine is sent, the USS Tigerfish 3, under the command of Commander Faraday, skippered by, played by Rock Hudson, and the chase is on. And so the idea here is the submarine has to go under the ice, get to Ice Station Zebra, punch its way up through, and get the canister, while the Soviets are going to drop their paratroopers in as soon as the weather clears. And of course, the race is on to get to all of this this Cold War technology, spy technology, that if one side or the other has it, could be destabilizing. That's the whole thing, right? We got to stop them from getting this information because it might give away something, and we don't want that, right? The movie was made in 1968. I saw it in 1981, and I've watched it many, many times since. It's actually a really good movie, and if you forget about the technical errors, if you will. It's a good story, and that's what's most important about it, is that it's a good story. In the late 60s, the United States of America began using what were known as keyhole spy satellites. The keyhole was a code name, and the hexagon system was a subsystem of the keyhole spy satellites. Now, let me caveat everything I'm about to say here by saying everything I'm about to tell you is unclassified. I have no direct knowledge of any of this. I was not there physically. And consequently, I cannot tell you definitively everything that happened, but culled from a variety of unclassified sources, this story has coalesced over the past, 48 hours, and it's remarkable. The hexagon system was the film recovery part of this whole thing. So you had these cameras that had literally miles of film in each one of them. By some accounts, there were as much as 7 to 10 miles of Kodak film inside each camera. And as the satellite would orbit over the Soviet Union, it would snap photographs and it would take pictures and the likes of that. And eventually the camera would be full, and they had to get the film back. And if you look at that there, according to this diagram, there were 4 film recovery canisters on there. That may or may not be true. I don't know. But there were more than one. So they had to get them back because the satellite itself was not designed to re-enter the Earth. So the film canister would be ejected from the satellite. It would spin in a retro spin down to 50,000 feet. Thrust cone would separate the chute off the chute display, and it would fall via a parachute to around 15,000 feet, where a specially modified C-817 would recover it. I'm not making any of this up. This is all true, folks. So the C-817, at one point, I believe they were using B-17s, old B-17s, but they designed these planes, they practiced with this, and they would, of course, catch these things. That was the idea, and then develop the film and go on their way. All sounds great in theory, right? I mean, it all works. It's been done before. It's nothing unusual or new or anything like that. It's just these canisters are a little bit heavier because they have, like I said, 7 to 10 miles worth of film in them, and they are, important, and so we need to make sure that we get them. So naturally, we sent this thing up there, and it snapped pictures and got ready and got ready to deploy its first film canister coming back, and you know what happened, right? The parachute didn't open on the very first one, and it took a nosedive into the Pacific Ocean, landing in a place where the ocean was roughly, by the accounts that were given, roughly 16,000 plus feet deep. Now, you need to keep in mind this was the late 60s, early 70s, and at that point in time, that was not something that was doable on a regular basis. There were very few devices, submersibles, submarines capable of going that deep, and in fact, hitherto that moment, it had only been done one time when the Trieste 1 in 1963, the original Trieste, went down to the bottom of the Marianas Trench for a few minutes and then came back up. And other than that, it was it. Even as men were landing on the moon, even as men were setting foot on a world, that this great technological challenge that we're told about, we had yet to really look at the bottom of the ocean. And so here's this film canister sitting on the bottom of the ocean, and we don't know. We know where it is, but we have no idea how to get it. That's a picture that was taken of it on the bottom by a remote camera. And as you can kind of see there, you need to keep in mind, you're looking top down. This thing is about 7 to 8 feet long. And so the suspicion here is that it has basically buried itself in the muck, coming down really hard. And so it was that the USS Apache, which was a fleet tug built in the 1940s, built during World War II. This tugboat actually has 5 battle stars. It participated in combat during the Second World War and the Korean War, and got a campaign ribbon during the Vietnam War. These ships are amazing. I mean, they really are. And this ship, as far as we know today, was transferred to Taiwan in 1974, and no one knows what happened to it after that. But for all we know, it could be out there still tugging. She was assigned to drag this thing, the USS White Sands, which is a floating dry dock, out into the Pacific Ocean where they knew the canister was. And so Apache lines up with White Sands there in the background, and out they head towards where this thing is. And inside the White Sands is this thing, the Trieste II. This is a deep submergence vehicle capable of making it down to 16,500 so feet, where the water pressures are so intense that a human being exposed to it would be instantaneously crushed. You would just be basically turned into jello almost instantaneously. It's, if you want to do the math, it's 44 pounds of pressure for every 100 feet down. So if you run those numbers, you'll find very quickly that 16,500 feet, let's see here, let's do it real quick. 16,000 feet, 16,500 feet, sorry. 16,500 divided by 44, 375-ish. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure down there. It's, that's times 44, not 16,500 divided by 100, Dave. Do 165 times 44, 7,260 pounds per square inch on your body. You would be instantaneously crushed. And so White Sands and Trieste headed out to where this thing was and began the process of trying to figure out how they were going to do this. How is Trieste? I mean, number one, getting down to it is tough enough. There aren't a lot of people that have done this. There aren't a lot of times that this has been done. Certainly not anything that's commonplace. I mean, quite frankly, more people at this point in time, more people had walked on the moon than had been to the bottom of the oceans like that at those kinds of depths. That canister down there, though, had to be recovered because the film on it was so important, or it was believed to be so important, that not only did we need to recover it, but more importantly, we needed to keep the Russians from getting it, because if the Russians got a hold of it, then they would know not only what we were looking at, but they could deduce through the film what our capabilities might be. And assuming that, the clever Soviets that they are, much like they did with the B-29, they might reverse engineer it and build their own. And then they'd be spying on us, and we can't have that. So Russian AGI ships, intelligence gathering ships, followed the White Sands and the Apache as they headed out there, and there were bears flying constantly over the ocean looking at people. The Tupolev 95, the famous bear that's still flying, by the way, to this day, much like our B-52 is still out there. The Tupolev 95 bear is it's a remarkable aircraft, and yet at the same time it's a long-lived aircraft, and it's still out there, still flying to this day. The Trieste got ready to go down, but when they got down there, they didn't really have a method to do this. Now, this thing is stuck in the mud. There is a mechanical arm on the Trieste. They took her down to that depth and discovered that at that depth, 16,000 plus feet, the mechanical arm simply wouldn't work. Now imagine that. Now this isn't like today, where you have a mechanical arm on the space shuttle that reaches out and goes, they've got the gloves and very fine motor motion kind of stuff and feedback servos and the likes of that make it, easy to use. This wasn't that. This was in the 1960s, early 70s, when technology was still toggle switches and servos, and very fine motor work was very difficult to come by. And so even if you could get the arm deployed, grabbing onto that thing and pulling it out of the muck might be problematic. But as it turns out, when they got down there, the arm wouldn't work at all. And it was like, well, now what do we do? Well, they came up with another idea. They They got together, some of the folks that work on this thing, and they decided that we'll hang a claw from the bowsprit of the Trieste. The claw will reach down and surround the film canister, and then we'll trip a little wire on the claw. The claw will close around the film canister, and then the Trieste can just deballast and pull right up. How they got the Trieste to surface was quite remarkable. Inside her, they had a lot of magnetized iron shot, and what they would do is demagnetize it, drop the shot, and that's how they would get back to the surface in this submersible called the Trieste. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that this thing will hold, depending on who you read, it's either 2 or 3 guys, and there's literally about the size of a refrigerator for a room for each person inside there. And you're in there, according to the sources, somewhere, it's supposed to be 8 hours. That's how long you're supposed to be able to survive inside of this thing. So you think about that, 16,000 feet down is about a 3-hour dive. You get to the bottom, you work, you got to have 3 hours back up. So that's 6 of the 8 hours. So really, you only got about 2 hours to both search for things down there and get this claw to go and grab it and pull it up. So this is like if this was the film canister, the claw comes down and goes, and then it's supposed to pull it out of the bottom. It's not a lot of time. Now, there are a lot of rumors out there that this thing was actually more capable on the order of 16 to 24 hours, so that would make it a little bit easier, but it's still not a very maneuverable vessel. It's very difficult to control it. You know, it's got thrusters and the likes on it, and it can go forward and backwards a little bit and turn, but it's not a sports car, folks. It's a very much a cumbersome kind of sea slug sort of thing down there. When they got down there to find it, when they got down there to look for the canister, they couldn't find it. It turns out that 2 of the transponders that they had placed on this thing, or around this thing, had been reversed in the logbooks, and so they were looking in the wrong place, like 2,000 yards off. And then when they got that straightened out, they finally got back. They didn't have time to get at that time, so they had to surface. So they build this thing, this arm that's supposed to go down there and recover it. Now, keep in mind, this is very similar to Project Azorian, which, depending on who you believe, the claw reached down and grabbed a Soviet submarine off the bottom of the ocean. If you believe Ken Sewell, the author Ken Sewell and former Parchi crewman, they got all of it. If you believe the CIA, they only got a third of it. But the idea was the claw would reach down there, grab this thing, and lift it up, and then, ta-da, everything would be cool, right? So imagine, if you will, you're in this thing 16,500 feet down, where there are literally thousands of pounds of pressure on you, on the vessel you're on. It is important that you accomplish this mission of getting this film canister, which contains film of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, of course, doesn't want you to get that film canister because it will lay their secrets open and create an imbalance in the strategic situation between the two nations. Bears are searching for you. The AGIs are all around the 2 ships as they're out there, the Apache and the White Sands, as they are dragging this thing out where they're going, and the Trieste is coming and going up and down as they try to recover this thing. And of course, the Russians don't actually specifically know what's going on, at least not as far as we know, but it's very possible that because of moles and trolls and everything else in our system, that they have been told what's going on, and so, or at least they have a hint of what's going on. And so who knows what's going on behind the scenes to try and interfere with things, much like Ice Station Zebra, where you got a guy sabotaging torpedo tubes and killing the real lieutenant that's supposed to be on the way, and we just don't know. And at that particular point, you start thinking to yourselves, well, every little thing that goes wrong, how likely is it that it's actually, going wrong versus somebody causing it? Because the Russians really don't want us to get that canister, even though it belongs to us, even though it's ours, even though we're on site salvaging it, even though we're doing all this, and even though nobody is literally supposed to know that we're capable of doing this, because we're not supposed to be, advertising the Hexagon system and the Keyhole spy satellite system, which, by the way, continued well into the 1980s. These satellites were very, very, very high resolution. Even in the late 60s and early 70s, they were capable of reading license plates from the altitude that they were taking these photos. So that these stuff was really, really good. And nowadays, we got Google Earth, and you can walk the streets of Pyongyang, and it's unclassified. But in those days, it wasn't. We don't want the Russians, we don't want the Soviets to know what we're doing. We don't want anybody to know what we're doing. We've got to get that canister. We've got to get it up, and we've got to recover this so that national security can be maintained, right? Well, they create this plan to recover it with this claw. They go down there, and eventually, through trial and error and problems and the typical stuff of deep salvage. Deep salvage is not easy, folks. It's not something that goes very simple. But they managed to get the cage around it. They managed to close the cage, and they managed to pull it out of the muck at 16,500 feet down. And they began to surface with this film canister inside the claw, and hopefully getting all the way to the surface to recover all of this. And about half of the way up, one of the people riding the Trieste turns on the lights, looks out there, and notices that there are silver flakes coming off of the canister. They can't really figure out what it is. But it's clearly starting to disintegrate. Well, this is not good. Around 3,000 feet towards the surface, it's getting worse. And as they close on the surface, as they almost get to the surface, as the Trieste is about to broach, they actually lower the cable with the cage down as far as they can get it, because they don't want to expose the film to light. And the divers go in, and they've got a big black bag and everything else. And even it's a couple hundred feet down there below the Trieste, as she's bobbing on the surface, we've got the wave action going. And as the divers reach the film canister to try and put it into the black bag so that it doesn't get exposed to light, as they reach it and start to put the bag around it in the cage, it literally goes poof and basically just disintegrates into millions upon millions of tiny little pieces. In fact, they managed to recover about 7 feet, as I recall, of actual usable film from the canister, but the rest of that 7 to 10 miles basically just disintegrates. And of course, what had happened was when it hit the ocean, boom, it basically destroyed it. And then the pressure down there at 16,500 feet held it together until they brought it up, and then it just disintegrated. And as it disintegrated, they lost everything that was on there, and the only thing that was on that 7 feet of film was basically an imprint from when it hit the water. It's a true story. Really happened that way. A real life ice station zebra, folks. It really, we didn't send the nuclear powered Tigerfish 3 with Commander Faraday up there. We didn't face off with any Soviet paratroopers or anything like that. But a decade, less than a decade after Alister McClain's novel, and less than a couple of years after the movie Ice Station Zebra came out, it happened. Now they managed to get this hexagon system working much better, and as far as we know, that's the only time that happened. But they did recover it. They did make it happen. The Trieste today still exists. She's no longer in use. She's actually parked in the Keyport Naval Underwater Warfare Museum, about 2.5 miles from where I'm sitting right now. In fact, I took that picture yesterday of her sitting in the parking lot there, and you can walk up and put your hands on her and touch her, and you can't get in, obviously. And I'm sure all the classified stuff has been removed and that sort of thing, but pretty interesting to look at, to think about that this thing has been down to 16,500 feet at least once in her existence, and probably more times than that. She also, on the day that the moon landing actually occurred, she was over USS Scorpion, investigating the wreckage of USS Scorpion in the Atlantic. Like I said, the USS Apache, with her 5 battle stars from World War II in Korea and her campaign service ribbon in Vietnam, was turned over to Taiwan, the Republic of China, in 1974. And we kind of lost track of her. Nobody really knows what happened to her subsequent to that. I would also add to there that if you want to read some fascinating stories about some ships that don't get a lot of credit, you should read about the tugs during the Second World War. They were pretty damn amazing. As for the White Sands, she's still afloat today. Well, not in this picture. In this picture, she's actually a dry dock inside a dry dock in Seattle, but she's still used today as a dry dock, floating dry dock on Lake Union in Seattle. You can go over there and see her. She's the largest ship to ever go through the Ballard Locks. In fact, she was too big to go through the Ballard Locks to get to the Lake Union Dry Dock Company, but they managed to figure out a way, the engineers did, to tip her over on her side, float her through the locks. And that's where she's been ever since, servicing all the little boats and ferries and whatnot that cruise around on the Puget Sound and Lake Union and deal with all that. You can still see her today over in Seattle, Washington. In fact, I'm kind of planning a trip over there. We want to take Ben to see the Ballard Locks, and we're going to swing by because it's not far from there and see the USS White Sands, the ex-USS White Sands, that once upon a time was part of a real-life Ice Station Zebra story that recovered that film canister that disintegrated from 16,500 feet down in the middle of the hottest part of the Cold War. Pretty remarkable story if you think about it. Pretty remarkable things that used to go on. It's really remarkable to me that they unclassified, declassified it. That seems like the kind of thing they would want to keep secret for a long time, but they decided not to. They decided to let us know, and there you go. All right, I know I said I wouldn't be here today, and this is not a live show, so I'm in Tacoma getting my eyes worked on, and I'll hopefully be back tomorrow, assuming everything goes all right. Okay, thanks for listening today. Take the time right now, tell the people that matter in your life you love them very much. You'd miss them if they weren't there, so don't pass up those opportunities. You don't want to have that regret. Plausibly Live, I'm Dave Bowman, and this is my show, The Dave Bowman Show, right here on the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody, and we will hopefully see you tomorrow, and if not, definitely on Wednesday. Take care, everybody. We'll see you later.
The Dave Bowman Show is a Slippery Fish Entertainment production for the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network. For more information or to complain about how the show offended you, the text or voicemail number is 209-565-DAVE. For more information about the show, log on to thedavebowmanshow.com.
Hey, I'm going to go do something productive. I'm going to go watch television.